Hello, 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 and welcome back to the other part of this presentation today. Right now, this is going to be virtual, a presentation on clinical research, shortening the gap and improving representation, and this is being done by Dr. Loaiza Bonilla. And are we up and ready? Thank you. And as you can see, he's the Medical Director of Oncology Research at Capitol Health Cancer Center. Thank you very much.
Hello, Dr. Bonilla. You are on right now. You can go ahead and start your presentation.
Can you hear us? Are you able to hear us now? She did. If you can hear us, Raquel texted you. Oh, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, you're good to start.
Okay, perfect. Yes, so you start the presentation. Excellent. Sounds good. All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be today. Wish I could be in person, but my travel schedule was a little bit more complicated. But I know it's a great venue. I've been there in the past in person, so I hope everyone's enjoying yourselves in the meeting. Arturo Loaiza Bonilla. I'm a medical oncologist and the medical director of research at Capitol Health Cancer Center. And today we're going to talk about clinical research, shortening the gap, and improving representation. I'm also on Twitter, as most of the rest of the faculty here. These are my disclosures. Well, so we all know that cancer is a significant burden for all patients, but significantly is having a big effect on patients of diverse backgrounds. And it's not only ethnicity, but also for patients who have rare disease, for example, hereditary conditions, et cetera. But this is a burden that it continues to affect many patients across the world, and the United States, of course, is no exception. We have seen a lot of progress over the last decade in terms of access to different therapeutics, different options, and this is just a quick example of the last about 10 years, of course, not 12, of all the new agents and indications that have been approved or appear in every single one of the therapeutic areas that we take care of patients, including immune checkpoint inhibitors, antibody-drug conjugates, bispecific antibodies, and all these focus on testing. And the question is, are we making a dent on cancer mortality? And the answer is yes, we are, very slowly and steady. But there is even more innovative therapies coming our way, such as expanded CAR Ts for solid tumors or any cell-developed therapies. We have CRISPR-Cas, we have different technologies that are coming our way. And even after COVID, we are seeing now the advent of vaccines and the use of mRNA for different therapeutic purposes. So how can we actually optimize the care of our patients if some of them are not even able to get the basic things that they require, such as testing, access to clinical trials, or even the basic FDA-approved drugs that we offer? So just to show you a little bit of the paradigms, so let's talk about cancer and Hispanic health. So cancer is still the leading cause among Hispanic patients or Latino patients. And it's followed by cardiovascular disease and accidents, but still, this is the lead cause of death for all of them, including myself. And some progress has been made to increase survival. As we can see over the last few decades, there have been significant improvements across the most common cancer types that patients suffer. However, modifiable risk factors that are still present and prevalent are still a burden for many. So there's less smokers compared to white patients, but there's more obesity. And of course, every single cancer has a different risk factor, but these ones are contributing to the ones that are leading the way for Hispanic patients. In terms of cancer in Black population, is no exception. Just to give you a quick example here, the trends on obesity and prevalence are increasing. And the mortality for cancers such as colon and rectum that had become very, now newsworthy because a number of figures in the entertainment industry and beyond have shown how prevalent these cancers may be even at a younger age. And how the mortality is still not improving as we want it to be. And that comes down now to the concept of health equity across oncology, but clinical trials is one of the focuses of today's talk, so we're going to talk about it, right? So it's becoming more and more understood in oncology, but there's some sobering statistics about diversity and access. First, less than 5% of adults in the United States have participated in a clinical trial ever, right? And overall is like 0.1% over the last decade. So about 12 million patients that have been diagnosed with cancer, only 0.1% participate. And we believe, oh yeah, we send so many patients for clinical trials. The answer is we have a lot of innumeracy. We think that we send tons of patients to studies, but the answer is actually we don't. We just remember that nice patient that we sent had a success story, but unfortunately, the vast majority of our patients, 99.9%, never actually get the chance to even discuss a trial in an informed consent form. We know what these numbers tell us. There's a lack of access to effective medical interventions that for the very patients that we intend to help. There's compounding health disparities already, so we're adding, injury, insult to the injury. We are having limited understanding of the effects of therapies in the full population, and also we are hindering innovation at a high societal and economic cost. So we know there's already data about how in value-based care structures this is becoming essential. And this is not just me, of course, the FDA has talked about it, and there's multiple reports and stat and beyond how we can improve access to clinical trials because there's a vast disparity right now on that. And this is real based on data. So as we all know, clinical trials is the mainstay in the development and validation of new therapies, right? So this is how we get these therapies into the options that we do and the guidelines that we use. But the disparity is becoming severe in patients with racial and ethnic minorities, with data showing that enrollment in the racial and ethnic minorities has actually decreased. So even with the population increases, there's less enrollment on patients of diverse backgrounds. There's some data here. This is a little bit older, but probably still true. So as you can see, for example, the Hispanic population represents about 16% of the United States. Only 1% of them participate in clinical trials. And Black African American is also similar, Asian population the same. So while racial and ethnic minorities represent about 38.7% of the United States, the rate of inclusion is could be as low as 2%. And what are the implications of all this? So first, well, all of them make sense, but let's go to the details. So with skewed enrollment and participation, conclusions of clinical trials may not be generalizable to the whole population. We know there's certain ethnicities or origins that actually may be impacted more than others, and also we need to make sure that we do analysis in depth of all these different populations because of what we mentioned. Some of them have more obesity or smoking history, etc. We need to understand their backgrounds. As the racial and ethnic minorities carry some of the highest burdens in the United States in terms of cancer, participation in clinical trials becomes essential and also very necessary for our patients to really get access to those therapies and also to advance science as a whole. And adequate representation in cancer research is essential for also being able to get those therapies to every single patient of ours. So what are the themes that are recurring in the assessment of barriers? Like, what are the issues that are not allowing us to do that beyond, us thinking that we're actually doing a great job, but we could actually do much better. So first is trust. So trust in medical providers and healthcare establishment is a major obstacle. Now with the age of COVID and misinformation is becoming extremely relevant on this area of trust. But this dates beyond before, the pandemic. So the infamous, as you know, tuskegee syphilis study, patients where they were given syphilis but never treated. And there's an overall distrust, particularly in the Black community, where about a third of them agree that scientists cannot be trusted, or they just rather prefer that, this is something that, their religious background tell them that they should endure and not even look at these options. So those trust concerns can be exacerbated by the lack of minority investigators, making workforce and diversity an essential target to improve trust. Access and knowledge, so something very key now as social media and search engines are relevant. So access and knowledge limit what patients may know about clinical trial participation. In one study, for example, they thought that a physician never talked to them about participating in clinical trials, and also unconscious biases in the medical community, because we may believe that the patient is not interested in the trial, and so we just not even offer it to them. And if they already have negative connotations about certain things in their care, then that gets compounded. And also social determinants of health. We may think as social determinants of health as something that the social worker in our hospitals needs to be focusing on, but actually that's personalized medicine. They include all the things related to logistics, how like socioeconomic factors, can they make it to the visits, they have the support that they need. And we have the resources, and actually the pharma companies have resources to provide for those patients, but we need to include them in part of the budgets. So just an example of economic stability, neighborhood, like just being around the support of the patients, education, food, and the healthcare system as a whole. All of them are important components and almost like a biomarker or a vital sign on my perspective. Trial logistics and costs is also an issue. So many times repeat use of certain trial sites and criteria are just basically copy paste. So when planning trials, there's always the same people, the same folks being selected for studies when there's plenty to choose from in different places. So the cost remains a consistent barrier across clinical trial participation. Lower income patients are much less likely to participate because of out-of-pocket costs. And all of the costs of study drugs are covered under the protocol. There are also many hidden costs, such as gas, hotels, missed work, and something that we always need to consider as part of those budgets, including the frequent clinic visits and designs that sometimes, for example, for best available therapy, they include, the same schedule of events as the intervention arm that we know is a novel compound that has long PKs. So it makes no sense. So it's something that certainly is hindering some of the trials, not for everyone. And this the NCI is making a significant effect in this, but pharma needs to keep up on this. In terms of workforce diversity in research teams, we know this is already a significant thing. There's much less proportion of Hispanic, Black, and minority overall oncologists in the workforce, particularly those doing research. So diversifying the research pool is essential, and something that ASCO and the Association of Community Cancer Centers has been promoting. This is just a paper that was presented in JCO in June 2022 that found that 40% of Black patients with metastatic breast cancer said that their cancer team did not inform them of clinical trial options, compared to 33% of white patients. And that was also part of the diversity component, because of the workforce was not necessarily congruent with those patients. And also, of course, we are busy. We as physicians, we care about our patients deeply, and I'm director of research myself, but I cannot keep up with the whole program as a whole if we don't have the support, right? So there's strict regulatory and compliance rules happening. There are, different clinical trial operations that we need to figure it out, silo departments. So we had to talk to one department versus the other. Things are not streamlined in different places. You had to check invoicing, lack of time because we are so busy in our clinical practices, even when folks have protected time, quote unquote, for that. And sometimes there's lack of research culture, collaboration. I only enroll to my things, and there's no support for, this study that these other physicians may have, and visibility of available trials. So sometimes we don't know what our colleagues who have across the street or across the network. We talk to each other, but if we don't have real-time information, that gets completely lost. And burnout is key. It's true. So this was the third most severe burnout specialty, and each additional hour per week is spent in unnecessary tasks actually increased burnout by 5% in private practice oncologists and 3.5% in academic practice. And so many hours that we actually spend beyond the 15 minutes that became infamous, that we all know is not true. We spend hours on patient care that people don't recognize, and we just need to make it aware about them too. I think is key, particularly about documentation. So they realized that by an additional hour, we can increase 5% of burnout. As I mentioned here, this is the Mayo Clinical Proceedings as well, showing the amount of time in clinical duties is just driving us nuts. And we need to change that for sure. So let's talk about solutions. So first, workforce. So in addition to improving diversity in physician workforce, which is a long-term process and we cannot solve it overnight, just greater community involvement and the use of culturally concordant staff, for example, Hispanic and staff and talking Spanish to patients has really improved in certain populations the enrollment in clinical trials. Cost, that is an easy one to fix. So if we actually include in the budgets for all the clinical trials, all the needs that our patients may have when they are underinsured or they have certain requirements, that can certainly improve access to those patients to clinical trials. Also, the knowledge. We need to have a specific cultural background for patients and retain staff that is able to tell them about clinical trials, put resources in the community so we can improve that. So one study found that Black enrollment increased from 9% to 16% after initiated an education and tailored support program for patients around clinical trials. The FDA is also helping us a bit. So they have been calling for greater inclusiveness in clinical trials for nearly 35 years. But now there's legislation by the U.S. House of Representatives that follow the FDA example, intended to increase racial and ethnic diversity in patients enrolled in clinical trials for new drugs. The idea of this legislation is to require sponsors to develop and submit diversity action plans to achieve demographic equity in phase 3 novel therapy. So now a bunch of sponsors are coming away asking us about this diversity component, which I think is key. And it's good that at least there's some serious business involved now on this end. There's some guidelines from the FDA that develop a strategy for enhancing diversity that anyone can access online. So these suggestions come from the FDA, including improving, the inclusion criteria, disease stage, gender, and ethnicity. One of the examples of removing restrictive inclusion and exclusion criteria, this is the little snippet here, is from the report from the ASCO and ACCC. But the 2018 report by ACS, the American Cancer Society, found that eligibility criteria disqualify 40% of patients in cancer trials, suggesting there's some unintended bias. For example, Black patients are more likely to have comorbidities such as cardiovascular disease, and they are significantly affected by those specific ones. So uncontrolled hypertension, just an example of that, right? So, and those are things that we can control. They just have to be managed appropriately and documented well. And some efforts are being underway to harmonize this criteria, particularly by longevity and ASCO, but more to follow because this just started only on lung cancer. We need to expand it across. And in terms of costs, I mentioned about financial challenges are closely related to the geographic hurdle of the trial access for the trial access. So 85% of our patients live out of the 1.7 million Americans diagnosed with cancer in 2021. They receive care at community-based practices. We know that, West Oncology and all that, myself is a community-based practice. So there's some legislation and all this signatories are on that graph there. And ASCO, the Government Relations Committee, we're working hard on pushing this legislation to move forward. It's called the Diverse Trial Act. Has the potential to result in more efficient and inclusive and accessible research that benefits patients to pay for costs of clinical trials. So that's something that we definitely need to promote and something that I'm just making my pitch here for everyone to be aware and support. And the next one is a very close topic of mine, which is technology, right? So bringing science and technology closer to every patient. So modern innovations such as artificial intelligence and digital tools And analytical software can help us accelerate the progress that we have made so far, and also optimize clinical trial designs that have been done right now while still keeping care of our patients. We can get them to access to studies. So, for example, decentralized clinical trials where we collaborate with different specialists in academic centers and beyond, but we actually take care of the patient. Also, just-in-time networks where we get the patient, coming to us eligible, then we only activate when the patient is fully eligible there. They're proving to be much more efficient than site-based trials and also more inclusive. So AI is right now tackling all these recurring themes in the assessment of barriers to research. So trust, knowledge, bias. They're improving the culturally concurrent content. They're giving us all these analytics with deep learning models. They're giving us data power, targeting efforts from site selection to enrollment. They're giving us payer-connected info, connectivity, efficiency, and speed. So all of them are going to become part of our workflows in the near future. So this is part of the improvements that we're going to do beyond just those cookie cutter things that we sometimes say. Clinical trials are incorporating digital tools. It's been limited, but it's happening. There's a lot of different apps for cancer care, and hopefully clinical trials are becoming one of those higher adopters in terms of apps and remote monitoring tools. One of the things that we are trying to figure out is data structure. So that's one of the big challenges, right? So we have so much data from different EMRs. Every single one has a different electronic health system, and we need to get all these things together and interoperable so we can actually get access in real time to those patients. So using AI for these purposes is key. There's certain technologies such as optical character recognition and natural language processing that can help us to solve the data structuring for registry formation and for real-time identification with these solutions. Just want to get an example. Of course, I'm involved in some of this research using mobile devices, digital health, and AI for clinical trial matching. So massivebio, where I worked, I had 100,000 patients that went through the platform, and we presented some of this data in ASCO, where not only we were able to improve patients to enroll in clinical trials by using this mobile app, but also decreased costs as a whole up to $39,000 per patient. And this was just in a small sample of colon cancers. There's much more analysis on the same topic. All right, so I'm coming on to the end of my presentation, but if you want to go deeper into this topic, I know there's going to be 3 more speakers today that are very knowledgeable in the space as well, and that I appreciate their efforts in improving equity and access to clinical trials and access to cancer care overall. But there's this paper that actually just came 2 days ago from Health Equity Barriers in Oncology Trials. So there's the link. You can feel free to read it at your leisure, and happy to have those exchanges in social media and beyond, and whenever we see each other in person. So in conclusion, the technology already exists that we can help overcome many of the biggest barriers for presentation in clinical trials. That has been paired with sensitive, patient-centric care, and all the solutions that engender trust, eliminate participation barriers, and optimizes costs, so we don't go into futile exercises of this, and really help those patients who are typically underserved. Remember that if we have one extra patient every year, we're improving enrollments almost by 40%. So the future is very promising, but it's up to us to make it to the full potential. And one of the things that are happening, and this is actually my real last slide, everyone's talking about ChatGPT. So this is going to be integrated in a lot of the solutions. And I thought it was key and just fun to ask ChatGPT to write solutions to improve access in clinical trials for minority patients in a Dr. Seuss style. So here it is. So all the trials, the cancer trials, for minorities, they're not just for miles and miles. They're a hope, a cure, a chance to heal, but accessing them, how hard it can feel. It is what we can do with a Susan Flair to help minority patients get the care they dare. Increase awareness with a loud shout, let everyone know trials are about. Make it easy with a quick hop to find trials with a simple hop and stop. Provide support with a cheerful grin, guiding patients every step from start to win. Foster diversity with a funky flair in trial participants so they truly care. So let's work well together with a joyful glee to make trials accessible for minorities. So I thought it was interesting. And with that, I thank you so much for your time. and looking forward to seeing you in person very soon.
Thank you, Dr. Loaiza Bonilla.